Welcome back to another episode of the podcast. Got my new studio here, Millie's room, and we've got the two cameras set up as always. And today, I've been speaking to a client last week about a specific topic that she came up with a very, very good name for it. And I think it is so important for when you're trying to lose weight, stay in shape forever, and ultimately live by some new rules that you're going to be abiding by to stay in shape forever. Because if we know that you can't do the same things that you did before, because that's what you got fatter because you did those things, we can't continue to do those things in that frequency, in that volume, in that amount of time, over a long period of time, without having the same costs happen all of the time. So what I want to talk about today is personal culture versus learned or genetic culture. And the difference is really, really simple. When you have a personal culture, you stand for certain things that you want to live by, as opposed to the influences from outside of your personal culture. So for example, your normal culture, your normal environment, your normal behaviors all come down to how you were raised and how you were brought up and what you learned along the way when you were doing your whole 16 years old, going out on the park, drinking some cider, or what you were doing when you were back at home, or what your parents were telling you, or what your school teachers were telling you, or your clique of friends were telling you, which is arguably one of the most important things. If you look at the research on determining factors for kids and how they grow up, it's actually their friends' parents, not you, unfortunately. Very, very interesting. So pick your kids' friends' parents wisely. So I'm going to bring up some notes because I made some notes. I want to make sure that it's absolutely critical for you guys to know how and why you should have a personal culture versus just relying on your old cultural backgrounds. And it's not even culture as in terms of South Asian, British, Black, Hispanic, African American. It's actually cultural in terms of what your belief systems are, what you believe to be true. And there's 3 P's when it comes to developing your own personal culture that are going to be essential for you to stay in shape forever and learning how to be this new person that you want to be and how to tread the boundaries and lines between what your own personal culture is, what you believe to be true, and what other people think is best for you. Now, there's some treading the lines across the lines that you're going to have to do. And sometimes you do go over to you're not completely changing everything that you do. You're not completely changing every 100% of your lifestyle, your habits to conform with these particular demands. But you are trying to find a balance between the two so that you do not have to flip-flop, but basically become controlled by other people's opinions, other people's belief systems that you've bought into over the years. So there's 3 P's. Number 1, P, having different levels of perception. What you believe to be true is really, really important when it comes to creating your own personal culture. You will have opinions of the world as you grow up in your 20s and 30s, that your opinions often get tempered down and get pushed down by other people's overarching beliefs in what you do. Easiest one to that in the South Asian community, how many mums and dads direct them forcefully in the area of doing dentistry, surgeons, medical fields, lawyers, that type of stuff. How do they funnel them down that pathway versus the kid deciding what's best for them? And that's where personal culture versus cultural bringing ups really tries to toe the line between the two, because there's a massive benefit to having parents make you do things that you're not willing to know, or you don't know. If you don't know, you don't know, before you then make those poor mistakes leading into the future, versus there's a towing a boundary, a limit that people come across that end up them not doing what they like and end up hating all parts of it just to appease other people's preferences, other people's expectations. And that's where when you do stuff that you don't want to do, unhappiness starts, demotivation starts, the resistance is super high. And when you get all those things, especially when we're related back to nutrition, training, exercise, lifestyle, and what you believe in, you're just not going to do it. You're not going to do anything that has higher friction, high resistance. You're the only person doing it, and you hate that you do it. If someone said put pins in your eyeballs, would you do it? No. So why would we think of anything else very similar to that in a different light? So when you're looking at perception, it's all about what if you believe to be true in these scenarios. So what do you believe to be true about carbs, or what happens when you stress eat, or what happens when you've had a bad day at work, or how much time you have, or how do you eat out at socials? Your perception on those environments will dictate the results that you have when it comes to your decision-making process. And our life, our perception of life is dictated by rules, both from a genetic, behavioral, upbringing perspective, and what you learn about the world to be true. There's always these rules. So for example, a rule, in my scenario would be, if I'm working all week, then I won't drink on weekdays past 1 beer. That's a rule that I've created. However, Another rule that I didn't create was, which I was born into, was I was grandfathered into when I went on holiday with my parents, is when I go to an all-inclusive place, I will get my money's worth. That was a subconscious rule that I was created. I had no decision on that. I was born into it, you know. I went to these places and my mum was encouraging me to get my money's worth. Go for another plate, have some extra stuff. We've paid £400 to go to Turkey for a fucking week. Use it. And when those things get created, they're rules that you did not set, that you live by now, that you might not be thinking that are negative, but have negative consequences. Something my therapist said to me, and you're not meant to do all of these things all in one go. You're not meant to always stick to what you think to be true, because ultimately some rules, some type of guidance is always necessary in order for you to guide you through what you don't know to be true. You know, there's a big saying, if you don't know, you don't know. And therefore there is some balance towards finding the right rhythm between your own personal opinions of what the world is to be true and other people's experience, and leading from their experience to not make the same mistakes that they did. So one of the biggest things when it comes to perception around your own personal culture versus what is to be true is rules. Everyone has it, rules, whether they believe it or not. They will have rules in their day that either they created or they were created for them as they were going through the years. For example, a rule that most people have is when they go on holiday, they will then get their money's worth, especially if it's an all-inclusive place, right? And that you didn't choose that decision when you were 10 years old. You didn't just choose that decision when you were 14, when you were going on holiday with your parents. You were grandfathered into that because they were probably saying, hey, go and get some more. You know, you don't want to waste that. We're going to get some more. You want to, you know, get your money's worth. I was in Turkey in Bodrum with my parents and they were encouraging me to go for extra food because he'd paid 300 quid at that time for a Thomas Cook holiday, all-inclusive place. And that was something that they could afford at that moment in time. So they wanted to get their money's worth out of it. So it makes sense why then over my 20s and my early teens, I would always try and get my money's worth out of food because I created that environment from my parents and what was told to me to be true when I was younger. The difference between that is that until you know that rules that are in your brain, until you know them, whether they're positive or negative, you'll never be able to decide whether it's something that you want to change or not. For example, like 2 plates of food, 3 plates of food, it's not a negative consequence unless you then get fat and you realize that that's an issue for you, right? No one realizes that snacking is an issue until they see the scale weight go up 2 kilos in 3 weeks. Because at the moment in time, the rule set that you have is conducive to your behavior. One of the best things that Angela, my therapist, said to me last week, she goes, why do you think you don't want to tackle that particular thing? And I said, because it's working for me. She's like, exactly. If it solves a problem, you won't see it as negative. So the rules that we create in our minds, the rules that we create overall, actually serve a purpose. Whether it is, if I get stressed, I eat more food, that serves a purpose. That's a rule that you created either from yourself or previously, that you created some happiness and some mental soothing from eating that chocolate or the takeaway or that family time that you get where you're like, oh, I do want to go out with the kids and get a McDonald's or a Five Guys. That creates a positive experience. So rule sets that you have within your life and the rule sets that you have to live by are serving you a purpose until they are not. And that's what the difference is between personal culture and brought up, genetic, behavioral, learned behavior, culture rule set, is that you didn't choose the ones before, so you didn't choose the negative consequences that it came with. You didn't know it had negative connotations because the people that showed it you, the people that had an example of it, they didn't care about the negative consequences of those decisions because they weren't in tune with what they wanted in terms of their body composition, their fat loss, their health, because that wasn't their priority. Their priority was get money's worth out of a holiday because they'd probably been skint for a long time and then they were utilizing that as an exploration of happiness and enjoyment. So it makes sense why they're talking like that. But as you get older, especially for clients that we have in our 30s and 40s, and as I'm learning that, and now I'm coming up to my 30th year and I'm coming to 31 in July, I'm slowly realizing that the more I get further away from my 20s and teens, the less of an impact, because I'm self-aware, because I'm seeing some negative connotations come from those behaviors. I'm now realizing that was the reason why that kept me in a poor shape, poor health, was struggling with my weight loss, because I simply didn't understand why and how this was a negative consequence, even though it had been super, super beneficial before. Anyway, a topic in terms of the tangent of rule set, but ultimately everyone has rules. And if you don't know yours, you'll find them out by trying other shit that like sticking to a diet or doing 10,000 steps or putting yourself in a scenario with meal structure, having to say no at social events. And you'll realize what your rule set is very, very quickly because you say these very words if something happens, then I do X. If we go for a social event, then I want to enjoy myself. That's a rule. Every time I go to a social event, then I enjoy myself. If I go for a Friday night with the kids, I don't want to miss out. That's a rule set. If I'm tired after work, I don't go to the gym or don't want to go to the gym. That's a rule. The more times you compound it with evidence, the more it becomes a rule. But equally on the flip side of things like plates of food. I used to believe that if I go to an all-inclusive breakfast, and I know I used the holiday example, but this is when your habits are completely exaggerated naturally because you are doing things like you don't do in a while. They have a higher status because you put some money behind it. And your habits are exaggerated when you go on holiday because you're letting loose a little bit and you're like, what I do normally isn't existent in this moment in time. It's new. So when I go on holiday for an all-inclusive breakfast, I get the orange juice. My mum's a perfect example of this. She'll get the orange juice, then she'll get the savoury stuff, then she'll get the sweet stuff, and then she'll finish it off with a coffee. That's her rule set. Every time she goes there, she does the same thing. And we need to learn what our rules are so that we can then do something about it if they are not conducive to the place that you want to be. Don't change all your rules. Don't change all the cultural dynamics. Don't change all the things that have been passed upon you in terms of behaviours when you were younger and moving that through unless they don't serve a purpose and you can find an alternative way around it. So that's perception. It's like without the perception of you knowing, and I'm just getting my notes up because it's really important, is that if you don't know what you believe to be true or what happens in those scenarios and what your rules are, then you'll always struggle to feel and figure out why you're not sticking to the things that you want to stick to, or why you find it hard in social events, or why you find it hard to navigate saying no to your kids, or saying no when you go out on a Friday night to the the fucking Harvester, if you want to go out with or Five Guys with the kids. You won't know why you struggle in those scenarios until you know your rules around it. And often it's the auditing of your thought process, it's the auditing of what you say in response to being challenged that will give you the answer that you need. So for example, like if you come to me and I'm doing your coaching and you go to me, I feel a bit guilty of I had like 10 beers with the boys on Saturday night. And I'll go, oh, why did you have 10 beers? And you're like, oh, well, it's what we do once every 6 months. We get together. We don't have many times that we have this. We just do it as a one-off every 6 months. And if I go out with the boys, I want to have a good time and drink. There's your rule. You've created it yourself in response to accountability. Now, rules cannot be challenged for the negative or the benefit, until you are challenged with accountability to justify your reasons. There's always a reason. There's always a thought process. There's always a trigger, because actions, so eating food is down here. You see me here, whatever this is. This is actions, where food is being eaten or drinks are being consumed. Then you've got behaviors, so how you behave in certain scenarios. Then you have emotions, whether you feel them or not, you have them. And that's the problem, most people don't feel them. Emotions, and then you have thoughts. You cannot, it's Monopoly board. You can't pass go unless you start at the top. And whether we believe it or not, and trust me, when I started therapy, I didn't know what thoughts I was having. I just saw the ramifications of my decisions. I just saw that I was eating more food, or saying yes more often, or not weighing the food, or not tracking the food, or eating too many cookies, or snacking too often. And I just thought it was a food problem. Anyway, it turned out to be a rule set in my mind over my thought process. And when I clearly looked with some help on holding myself accountable to that thought process. So in the scenario, if I have a break in the afternoon, then I'll have some snacks, or I feel like I need some snacks. That's a big one. I feel like I need. That's a rule set. I feel like I need X. And when you challenge that and you're like, why logically do you need that? Most people can't answer that. They just see it as a feeling, and they feel like feelings need to be honored because every feeling that they've had before was either positive or negative, and they're so strong inside of you. And therefore, you've created a rule set, you feel an emotion that you feel that you need to have, then you action it, and then you eat it. So anyway, I go off tangent a little bit just to help you understand the context of why it's so important to assess what your rules are in your life and equally create new ones if they're not serving your purpose. The second one is creating rules. So how do you create new rules for yourself to make sure that you're doing the things that you need to do? And it's ultimately, firstly, once you have that awareness of what those rules are, personal culture is, or generational culture, the ones that have been brought up, it's the 2 plates of food, it's the eat until you're full food, I can't say no to food, I'm addicted to sugar. These are all statements that aren't true because no one's addicted to sugar. You're not sniffing up your nose and then going out on a night out. You can only be addicted to things that are class A drug. Sugar's not a class A drug. It's fucking Haribo, you know what I mean? But you feel like you need it and you can't normally say no to yourself. Anyway, so you see these rules, and then on the second hand of it, you're like, well, I need to change some of these. So you identify one of them. So for example, a personal culture decision can be that I'm going to change when I get stressed from eating food to when I'm stressed, I go out for a walk. Now, that might be a small decision. That might be not as fun as caning a pack of biscuits, but it will create a different rule for when you get in that scenario. Even small things like, when I go to a restaurant, I pick one plate of food. Or when we have dessert with our family, I share a dessert. And those small things can make massive difference to your own personal culture. The alcohol one's a massive one. Like putting a rule in that during the week, or you only drink once a week, can create this personal culture where you're in control of your decision making. And when you've decided on only drinking once per week and that second opportunity comes up, then you can say, no, my goal is to be healthy, happy, not lose any sleep, not be really, really tired tomorrow morning. I want to be, sharp tomorrow with the kids or with work. So I'm going to say no to this because my culture, my personal rule set is that I only drink once a week. Now, that could be a rule set of 2 times a week, 3 times a week. It could be just not drinking every day. Whatever the rule set is, you can create it because no one's writing them for you. Obviously, previously, if you're in your teens, your 20s, you're probably taking a lot of the stuff that you've had previously, background, genetics, family, will be impressed upon you, and you'll find hard to break that mold. But I think, there's a statement that says, like, after 30, you start giving a fuck less. You start fucking less, but you start giving a fuck less about what other people think. And I think that's why it's so beautiful. If you are in your 30s and you've got kids, you're coming up to your 40s or something like that, it's important to note that you are now 10 years, 20 years away from the decisions being made by other people. And now the time is in your hands, and the decisions are in your hands if you keep these rule sets or not. And a lot of people say, oh, but I've had this habit for 20 years. Totally understand. But if you've had it for 20 years and you're getting fatter, maybe if you change it, then you won't get fatter. And yes, it's hard. Changing rules, changing psychological barriers that you have are immensely difficult. But I tell you what is also difficult, getting type 2 diabetes and having heart attack and having a heart disease and not being able to run with your kids and not being confident in a dress or looking at yourself in the mirror and not hating the way that you look. And for me personally, they're big leverage points for me not being a fat pig, later in my years, because I don't want to have those things. And that can help you navigate those own personal rules to make them better. And I think most people think that you're just shit with it. So, I'm just shit with my habits. I'm just shit with snacking. It's like, break it down. Like, no one's shit at anything. You're shit at a particular process of it. Like, for example, like, you're not shit at driving. You're shit at reverse parking or looking in your mirrors before you turn, like everyone fucking else in Dubai is. Or I'm really terrible at manual gear shifting, holding on the clutch. That's not being a terrible driver. That's having one specific element of the skill of driving that you are terrible at. And if you break your own rule set down to one particular decision, that's the rule that you can change. So I will change the fact that when I go out for dinner, I always have 2 plates of food or 3 plates of food. Right, just start there. Don't worry about the rest of the week. In one day, on the weekend, I'm going to choose one main meal, and I'm going to use that as my leverage to say, when I go out for a dinner at the weekend, I only have 1 plate of food, regardless of what happens at the rest of the table. And I'm going to hold myself to that. And that's practice. And what the benefit of you creating your own rules are, that you live by the positives and you die by the negatives. So if you don't create rules and the things that are holding you back right now are not changed, you will have to accept the benefits of go and living your best life, but then also accept the negatives of not staying in shape and regaining your weight back and being unhappy, which is a price that you pay because it's your own thing. With autonomy, and the reason why we're talking about this with personal culture is because it is literally autonomy. Like when my client said to me, oh, I have my own personal culture because of this, this, and this, I was like, That's what autonomy is. Autonomy is your own choice, your own control of your health and fitness, just expanded out into your whole world. And you don't have to get granular with every decision that you make and every rule that you make, because sometimes you can flip. And sometimes I do go out for like fucking a buffet and have more than one plate because I want to have it. But it's a choice that I choose rather than it being something that is automatic, that is negatively occurring on a frequent basis. So if you can start making better decisions around a rule set that you want to provide on, and you want to agree to because you see the negatives of what you're currently doing, you will start and slowly start chipping away at the cultural decision making, the cultural rules, the genetic rules, the behavioral rules, the things that you learned when you were growing up, the things that you learned from your first ever diet, the things that you learned from fucking Cambridge diet. They're all rules. I can't lose weight when I eat 3 meals a day. That's a rule that isn't particularly true and isn't helpful, which you might have learned from doing intermittent fasting. Or I can't lose weight when I eat carbs. You're creating that rule in your brain, which is not particularly true. So all of these things come down to you nitpicking at the rules that you want to create on a day-to-day basis and starting with some basic ones. Most of staying in shape forever is not granular detail. It's not tracking food. It's not weighing food. It's not being meticulous. It's not saying no all the time. It's not being super motivated, super disciplined. It's not any of those things. It's living by rules that are conducive to your lifestyle and these staying in shape forever habits. If you could have a rule set, a perfect rule set of like 90% of the week you're eating home cooked food, you're drinking 3 to 4 liters of water a day, you're getting 8 hours of sleep every day, you're getting 10,000 steps every day, and you are moving your body in exercise 2 to 3 times a week. If they were your rule set, I can 100% guarantee that you will be one of the fucking top 10% of the healthiest people on the planet, because that rule set is so perfect for staying in shape forever. And therefore, you have a little bit of a balance with the weekend stuff. You eat mostly at home, get your exercise in, you get your steps in, you get your sleep in, which helps health overall, cognitive function, mood, energy, and then you get water in, which hydrates you, which is super important, which people miss. And if you get all those rules in to your day, you're going to become a very fucking good human when it comes to your health and fitness. And people often miss those small ones. So I hope you can see that. Like, what I want to kind of dispel is like, and make aware that in this short episode, that everyone has rules right now, and if you don't know what they are and you just see yourself as low motivation, low discipline, I can't stick to anything, I really struggle in this area, there will be a rule that you're creating or telling yourself in that moment of time that is conforming to that rule set that's creating all these actions afterwards. A big one is, I had a really hard week at work. I need to treat myself to a takeaway. If I had a hard week at work, then I will eat a takeaway. That's the rule. Now, if that's what you want, you like the takeaway stuff and it doesn't affect the fact that you gaining weight or stuff, enjoy it. Have a lovely time. But if you can honestly say that's your biggest area for your diet, that's the biggest area for you staying in shape, that's the biggest area that you fall short on, then it's a negative. And when something is a negative, you can then change it if you think about it so much. And I want you to go granularly. I don't want you to say, I'm shit at discipline, I'm shit at motivation. That doesn't exist. You are shit at one area of your life in motivation, in discipline, that is leading you to a negative result. For example, like if people say that they don't have discipline, I always say to them, well, so you did a degree, right? You did a master's, right? Okay, cool. So did you study when you had your master's? Yes. Okay, did you do it for a consistent basis over a 3 or 4 month period? Yes. Oh, so you were consistent and you were disciplined with studying, right? Yes. Okay, so you have discipline? Yes. So what area of the nutrition are you not disciplined in? And let's solve that, because you've proven that you've got discipline, we've proven that you've got motivation, but you're not in one granular area. So when you find that negative, the thing that is stopping you from being there, the rule set that's hot, like stopping you from making those changes, that's when you can start nitpicking at your own personal culture to create those things. And by the time you've done 3, 4, 5 years of your own health and fitness journey, you should have a new rule set that looks completely different based on your lifestyle right now. And you can constantly change these rules. There's a book by Jordan Peterson, which is Chaos and Order. In order to have chaos, you need to have order. So you need to have structure. You need to have rule set to be able to break the rules. The statement around rules are there to be broken is so true that actually what we forget is that if we don't have rules, then it's just chaos. It's just chaos anyway. But if you have structure and you have rules, and on an odd occasion you want to break those rules to have something of better delight, you are in a better place because 80-90% you have rules, and then you're breaking it 10%. Whereas if you never had rules that are conducive in the first place, it's just chaos in that particular area of your life. So it's really important to know your rules, know what they are, and start changing them to create your own personal sphere of personal culture of what you stand for, what you want to achieve, what you do on a day-to-day basis, how you think around certain scenarios. And I know this is a broad statement, but you should definitely go and have go and think about, what rules do I have when I'm taking the kids out? What rules do I have when I'm sitting at a dinner table? What rules do I have when I'm, sitting at a social event? Because they're the rules that you'll be seeing that will be expanded on holiday, for example. As I mentioned, you will see your rules played out, and if you're getting negative consequences from your rule set and you don't want to continue on in that direction, then you need to change your rules, which will change your behaviors, which will change your actions, and then you'll then get the actions of a person that is losing weight or getting in shape or staying in shape, which all starts from assessing whether your thoughts, your rules that you have in certain scenarios are ones in which you need to change. And it doesn't always mean changing them completely. So I just want to make sure that before we get off this podcast, you are not going, Nathan's making me fucking live a life of a monk. No. If your rule set is, when I go out at the weekend with the boys, I want to be able to drink heavily with them, fine. Don't change it if you like it, but change something else in your fucking day to make sure that you're not gaining weight off it. Once you know your rules, you can either stick or twist with them. I've got rules that you probably don't even think like a coach would have. Like, I had Deliveroo, and I don't cook food at all throughout the week. And at weekends, I order Deliveroo 3 times a day. That's my rule at the weekend, because I don't want to cook and I don't want fat loss and I want to maintain. But equally, my cost of keeping that in, because that's the rule that I like, breakfast, lunch and dinner from a Deliveroo, Saturday, Sunday, I fucking love it. But my cost to make that happen is that during the week, I just have organized food and I eat that food only. So you don't have to change some of your rules. You can change your lifestyle, your changes, your strategy around it to facilitate these things if they're a rule that you want to keep. So I hope this was useful. It's a topic that we'll probably come back to a lot more once we look into this deeper, and once we really get an understanding of why personal culture is so important. I think, but on a nutshell, you have to be aware that the decisions that you make today, the way that you think today, the way that you're acting today is a summary of your friends, your family, what happened to you in school, your own parents' beliefs or cousins' beliefs, or what they acted like, or the first ever diet that you went on, or what you did during your early years. They're all accumulating as decisions that you make today. The way that you see the world today is based on those decisions. And if they're not conducive, and you didn't have positive rules that are contributing to you staying in shape towards your health and fitness, which is super vital for staying alive, quite frankly, is that you need to then change those things that were given to you and change them to things that you choose to do. And that's autonomy, control your health and fitness. And you do that by understanding what came before you, what situations I think about and how I think about them, and what I do in those scenarios, and then what I want to do now and how I want to live in the future. And that middle ground is autonomy, to have control and freedom of your own health and fitness journey. Peace.